Human eye lies. Who doesn't love a good ghost story? If you talk to any takers of old buildings or hop onto any number of subreddits, you're sure to find countless stories of personal run-ins with a spoon, and encountering a ghost, whether it's in an old building, your bedroom, or in the social office, does sound truly terrifying. If we want to talk about explanation, seeing ghosts, we should start by talking about our eyes. Pretty much every ghost story happens at night or in the dark place. And that's probably not a coincidence. Many ghost sightings are brief glimpses of something just to the edge of a person's field of vision. Then they look to see what it was, but it's gone, and that kind of sighting and probably rocked up to the way human peripheral vision works. You see, your ability to detect color and resolve detail drops off considerably the edge of your visual field, but your ability to detect motion actually increases. That's because the periphery of your retina has fewer cones, light-sensing cells that exist detecting color and shape, and more spots which are connecting motion, especially in low light and/or high spook conditions. It's easy to notice motion out of the corner of your eye without clearly making out what's actually moving. Your senses can be heightened, and you're on alert, which increases the likelihood you'll be frightened by otherwise mundane visible stimuli. Just catch something moving out of the corner of your eye, only to find nothing unusual there when you look. It probably wasn't a supernatural being. It's much more likely that the mechanics of your eyeballs made something ordinary seem extraordinary. That ghost crept past and then vanished. Voice recorder. One of the most common devices in a normal investigator's toolkit is the humble audio recorder. They use it to pick up EVPs, or electronic voice phenomenon. Pluralized quite right when you spell it out. Anyhow, the idea is that you can hit record, ask questions to a room, and then hear vocal responses in the audio when you play it back. And that's it's just that those vocal responses aren't generated by ghosts. They're generated by your brain. Another way our brains can trick us is dually Vinci to find familiar patterns even when none exists. We've talked about this before in the context of seeing faces in rocks or toast. What happens because our primate brains evolved to quickly recognize one another. An ability comes with a sort of also recognizing familiar forms in others. And it turns out, this isn't just a visual thing. We're so keen on recognizing other humans that we often hear human voices that aren't really there. This is what's known as audio pareidolia, and it explains why you might hear a cryptic voice and radio static, or someone whispering your name in the wind. Brain. It tends to make sense from nonsense. Static and amplified background noise are shaped into vague words, that a little sprinkling of wishful thinking, because you're trying to hear words from the other side, and you end up with a full-blown ghost voicemail, and the power of suggestion can even alter what message you hear. As we explained when we talked about auditory, there are a lot of factors that can affect how your brain interprets ambiguous. Experiments from both white noise and human speech have demonstrated subjects are given context beforehand. Their interpretation of Article C seemed expectations, even if the context is deliberately incorrect. So if we were to play you something we recorded in the old sawmill across town at 3 a.m. the other night, your impression would be very different. In either case, the speech or words, all it was just ambient noise, and maybe saying nice strong sigh Shobi convinced me that ghosts are just when people get confused about motion off to the side or mishear static. Fair enough. So let's crank up the science. Electromagnetic field. No serious paranormal investigator would be caught dead without is an EMF. Detector EMF, of course, stands for electromagnetic field. Radiation that surrounds flowing electrical currents. These fields can be naturally occurring, can come from electronics, and they range in frequency. Now, paranormal investigators use EMF detectors track ghosts because they're incorporeal forms generally. But some say I think what's really going on is the opposite. EMFs may actually cause the feeling of being haunted. We mentioned a while back that some ghost stories can be explained by the phenomenon of currencies below normal human range of hear. And though you can't hear them, they still make things in your body wiggle around a bit like other sound waves, to leading to everything from the feeling of being watched. Right, seeing apparitions. An EMF might be kind of similar, but instead of waiting up the mess with our neurons, Pretoria studies have demonstrated that low-frequency EMFs can darken our mood or other negative psychological effects when applied to regions of the brain, and the effects can be much stronger. Putting visual hallucinations to cat. Not everyone may be affected the same way, if at all. For example, the relatively minute EMF clock was enough to make one patient hallucinate nighttime visitors in her bedroom. But it turned out that the pulses generated by the clock were similar to one that induced seizures in some people, and an interaction between the clock's EMFs and the pit of existing brain injury, because these fields can have strong psychological, Some scientists think the ubiquitous EMF, the modern era, or a lot of, if not most, ghostly experiences, while the alarm clock was definitively tracking down EMF sources in every haunting, isn't so straightforward. EMF's oodles of sources, including just how it's out there. So with all the Wi-Fi and smartphones and such, it's nearly impossible to accurately isolate and assess the effects of specific electromagnetic signals. So if a paranormal tries to tell you that an EMF spike means that there's a good boom with you, you can tell them that your BS is also spiking. Some of the creepiest encounters with ghosts are those don't occur in some creepy haunted place. They happen right in your bedroom. Mid patients by shadowy figures are a major feature of ghost encounters, and probably the freakiest. But your brain is probably to blame here too, because your body is asleep, but your brain isn't, and you get left experiencing an honest-to-goodness waiting. Sleep paralysis tends to happen when the normal state is accidentally disrupted, often due to some sort of chronic disease. Neither your body nor your brain are fully awake in surroundings but still unable to move. And this is the key bit. Still possibly dreaming is why people experiencing sleep paralysis hallucinate. Science isn't entirely sure why see if the form instead of other things, but it may have to do with how sleep processes go haywire. In the lab, if you tamper with a part of the brain called the temporal parietal junction, you can give people out of bodies because it's a key part and recognize our own body. It's normally not active witness, but it could be activated or partially activated sleep paralysis. And that might mess with it enough for you to sense your body as someone else. You might even be convinced that the other person where else in the room. Some psychologists that just the right neurons firing at just the wrong time may cause us to use the built-in blueprints of our bodies to need another bee. And once that happens, they listen to life. These are neurons that fire in response to actions performed by others, and importantly, which fire in the same way when we perform those actions ourselves. If we paralysis, these neurons are firing while other weird neurological effects are happening. With a self-made projection of a person which is doing stuff your mind is making up as an autonomous entity controlling its own actions. In other words, your natural sleep cycle gets interrupted. Your blurry brain makes you see a person, and then it tricks with thinking that person is moving around right before I was gone, helplessly frozen in place. It might be terrifying, but more than a sophisticated bad dream. None of this is to say that anyone is any less valid or panic-inducing. Just not that every one of these experiences should. The answer is ghosts ultimately. We don't understand, and yes, that can be frightening. But in many cases, understanding is only because we haven't or too unknowable to ever make sense to us. The world in your brain has a lot of weird stuff that can throw at you. Understanding it can make it less scary and sad. Always be there for you to make the paranormal. Just thanks for watching this episode of Science Hechos. Please like, share, and subscribe Science Hechos, and don't forget to click bell button.